Hi, I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Nice to be back again doing this. I have a ton of ideas for new content which I hope to get up fairly soon, but the day job's got pretty intense and at times a bit weird. It's been another strong year with some really interesting and wide-ranging releases, from mathcore to experimental electronics to searing tributes to best friends and pop bangers. I mean, this year has had something for everybody, and I hope that is reflected in this end of year list. Now, there are tons of great records in 2021 that didn't make my top 20 list. I'm gonna just list them off now so you get an idea of some of the other stuff that I really genuinely did enjoy. Wolf Alice's Blue Weekend, Lil Sims's Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, To See the Next Part of the Dream by Parannoul, Nod's La Mort du Sans, Shade by Grouper, 21 by Succumb, Vijay Iyer, Linda May Hanno, Tyshawn Sori's Uneasy, Black Encyclopedia of the Air by Moormother, and Conflict of Interest by the forever excellent Gets. So sit back, relax while I go through my favourite 20 records of 2021. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What do you think I should have had on my list? Do let me know in the comment section below and let's have a conversation about it. 20. The War on Drugs, I Don't Live Here Anymore. So if you look to my right, you'll notice what is probably the worst album art of the year. I mean, look at the state of it. Adam Granduciel running in white space with a T and a guitar under his arm wearing his coat. Shite. Aside from that, this is another great release from The War on Drugs, taking that Springsteen, Dylan-esque Middle America longing and actually trimming the fat off of some of the previous releases. A track like Changes demonstrates the ability the group has to write an earworm of a track. You have those chorusy guitar lines, driving bass, and emotive melodic piano at the end. Title track I Don't Live Anymore has Adam kind of duetting with this punchy guitar lead and Lucius providing some glorious backing vocals. And Rings Around My Father's Eyes might be one of the best War on Drugs tracks to date. 19. Serpent with Feet, DEACON. Moving on to something even leaner now, Josiah Wise, aka Serpent with Feet, make sure you spell it without the spaces, has unleashed a record in 2021 that, despite being just shy of half an hour in length, feels grandiose. R&B with an experimental edge, and Wise is still incorporating those gospel elements which imbue his songwriting with a feeling of kind of spiritualism, I suppose, and that's coming from someone who's aggressively agnostic. You know, it feels kind of sacred in some ways. Part of that is the positivity of emotion that flows through every single track on DEACON, celebrating black queer love and intimacy in a way that does feel genuinely life-affirming. It's a revelation to listen to a record so infatuated with the idea of everyday love, something that at the end of the day we all crave. The low-key Old and Fine, where Wise talks of growing old with the person he loves, and it's complete with those sparing finger clicks and distant percussive bells. I love it. 18. Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders and the London Symphony Orchestra, Promises. This was such an unexpected collaboration when it was first announced, but now I've lived with this record for a fair few months, I'm thinking, Christ, why did no one think of this before? Promises brings together avant-garde sax legend Pharoah Sanders, electronic artist Floating Points aka Sam Shepard, and the London Symphony Orchestra for good measure. This record is split into 9 movements, but really it's one dulcet 45-minute piece which pleasures in the gradual shifts in harmony between all of the collaborators. Sanders is front of the billing on this record in a way, with his dominant saxophone tone placed right in the middle of the soundscapes, with Shepard applying gentle pressure and encasing it with his synthesis techniques, which kind of wax and wane in the breeze of the London Symphony Orchestra strings. It operates like one of the best ambient records, a sonic journey best experienced in the silence of your head, with big, melon-squeezing ear cans to really push out all of the other noises in your life and just focus on what's going on here. I promise you, you'll have a good experience. 17. Injury Reserve, By the Time I Get to Phoenix. If you haven't heard of this record, this release is both shadowed and a eulogy of one of the band members, Stepper J. Groggs, sadly dying at the young age of 32. Now, I never really clicked with the previous releases from Arizona's Injury Reserve, but I did admire their use of mashing up traditional hip-hop songwriting with kind of glitchy experimental sounds and kind of turning the idea of a hip-hop group on its head. But there's something about By the Time I Get to Phoenix that just works for me. It's a dark piece of work that often blooms with a sadness that's amplified by the knowledge that you're hearing vocals from an artist who has been taken way before his time. Straight into that second track, Superman That, which takes a sample from Athens, France by Black Country New Road, who you might see later on the list, throws on top of these frenetic drum samples, and then you have Richie T's forlorn auto-tuned vocals singing Ain't No Saving Me or You. And the entire record would feel pretty exclusively dark and gloomy if it wasn't for that final track, By Storm, which takes a sample from Brian Eno's Here Come the Warm Jets. And it's one of those moments of introspection, probably introspection over the last few difficult years for the band, but I feel like it ends on a kind of positive note, maybe the promise of a brighter future with a little less rain. 16. Japanese Breakfast, Jubilee. So Michelle Zauner is basically unstoppable at this point, right? A Korean-American songwriter and musician. She knows how to create a cracker of a tune, but filling it with really interesting, intimate details of her own life. It's almost an autobiographical experience listening to how she writes. As an aside, if you haven't read her autobiography, Crying in H Mart, I'd absolutely suggest that you do. It actually brought me a lot closer to her music by reading about the death of her mum at the age of 25 and how she kind of kept her memory alive through the food of their shared homeland. Jubilee doubles down on the brilliance of 2017's Soft Sounds from Another Planet with a masterclass in thoughtful pop songwriting. From Be Sweet, which is surely one of the songs of the year, and if you've heard it already, you know what I'm talking about, to the synthy swells and heart-on-sleeve lyricism of Posing in Bondage. The moment the track Sit kicks into gear is one of the most euphoric moments in the year for me. I'm obsessed with this record. I think it's brilliant, and if you haven't taken a listen yet, you absolutely need to. 15. The Armed ULTRAPOP. It's the Detroit hardcore noise experimental rock group that has been really getting critics interested this year more than ever before. It's been really heartening to see their name crop up on so many end-of-year lists, seeing their propulsive, forceful sound getting a good bit of attention. Part of me wishes the same people would have been on board for 2018's Only Love and 2015's Untitled, two records that I think are even better than this, and I've talked about them previously on Albums of the Year videos and Albums of the Decade as well. They're even more untethered and frenetic than this release. ULTRAPOP ups the melody considerably, but it doesn't lose that riotous approach with a production style that feels like a brick smashing through your speakers trying to get to your face. Mashing tight pop structures with staticky fuzzed guitars and violent percussion, it's a match made in heaven. It just works. And Average Death is probably my favourite track on the whole record, with a chorus to die for. Time to ascend. 14. Sweet Trip. A tiny house in secret speeches, polar equals. Fans of the glitchy experimental post-rock duo may not have enjoyed their 2021 offering quite as much as previous records Velocity designed Comfort and You Will Never Know Why, but for my mind, this pair have created something which does their legacy proud. You know, they've been one of those artists that a lot of underground musicians, music fans have loved. And I think that they've really just added to that legacy in a great way with something that keeps the songwriting, which is, I think, really tight and very memorable, on an even keel with the glitchy stuff that keeps things interesting. Fans of the trademark shoegaze wall of guitar sound will have so much to enjoy here, especially that opening track, Tiny Houses, which is an irresistible track. I mean, Roberto Burgos might be singing You Take My Breath Away on this. That was me on a first listen. Some might find the length of it a bit exhausting at 1 hour and 10 minutes. I mean, it's not a short listen, but I think there's so much to admire here in this release, and Valerie Cooper and Roberto Burgos have done themselves proud and their legacy proud. Should definitely listen to it. 13. Hannah Peel, Fur Wave. In taking inspiration from our natural world cycles, the complex ecosystems that make up the world that we inhabit, Hannah Peel has created one of the most interesting electronic records of the year in Fur Wave, and it's another triumph from one of the UK's premier electronic musicians. The way she builds the tracks on this record using tidal analog synths, those disembodied choral vocals, and then these bursts of electronic noise that kind of shoot through the space. Everything on here just feels perfectly formed like life itself. Don your headphones and get lost in a track like Carbon Cycle or Eco-Vocative. These are tracks that are stunning, and they feel in some ways like they're humanistic and they're striving for hope. and that comes across the entire record. I said it earlier in the year, but you really don't get much more deep cuts than this record. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's fantastic, and you really should go and experience it for yourself. 12. The Bug. Fire. Time for your fucking head to be blown off your neck. Get ready for a hackneyed pun. Fire, by Belgian-based producer The Bug, is an incendiary piece of work. I said it was shit, didn't I? Seriously though, Kevin Martin has become known for his barraging brew of aggressive UK bass music, dancehall, and even a bit of grime. It's an experience akin to being kneecapped, but for some reason you're enjoying the experience. This is surely not only his bleakest record so far, but also the bleakest record on my end of year list. The opening track, The Fourth Day, imagines a pandemic accelerated forward by 4 years, where vaccinated people are being exterminated by the government and we can't see our families, and our food is being delivered by robots. Hits pretty hard at the moment, especially with the new variant taking its hold of the UK. And that dispirited outlook runs through the rest of the record. It turns the frustration into a blind rage that spews from the sub-bass and those rumbling, punctured drum samples. Martin is a supremely talented collaborator, and the guest appearances here make the record. Flow Down on Pressure and Hammer, a killer turn from For Fuck's Sake Why Though and How About That, More Mother on The Violent Vexed. What a record. 11. Black Country New Road, For the First Time. 6 tracks, 40 minutes, and what's probably one of the most hyped bands in recent memory. But what a record it is. Collective Black Country New Road released their hotly anticipated debut record in 2021, and not a single second of this is wasted. It seemed weird to say, but it sounds like a record only Black Country New Road could make. And the reason it sounds weird to say that is because they've only been around for what feels like about 4 minutes. But it's the angular post-rocky guitar riffs, it's Isaac Wood's unique vocal style, it's their infatuation with horns, and that all kind of is broiled up into this record that just feels like one of the most interesting things I've heard in a very long time. And it's on a debut record, no less. Athens, France is probably my favourite track on here. It was the one that Injury Reserve sampled on Superman. That melancholy finale that builds up is one of the moments that I've returned to over and over again this year. And even a track like Sunglasses, which was originally released as a single quite a long time ago, it's lost none of its potency in the context of the record. They've already got their follow-up ready for next year, and I can't wait to see what they do next. 10. Ski Mask. Pool. What's probably my favourite comfort record of the year actually snuck up on me in a big way. Electronic musician Brian Mueller's new record has the tangible warmth of a record like Aphex Twin's Cyro. That was actually the first record I thought of when I listened to Pool for the first time. He takes skittering breakbeats, sweeping and elastic pads, and enveloping bass over an hour and 43 minutes. Yeah, you heard that right, that's long, but the length doesn't matter. And I don't say this about many records because I'm one of those people that loves a track listing and loves to listen to a record as the artist intends it from start to finish. But this record feels a bit less like that and more of a mixtape, I suppose, where you take some of the tracks that you like the most and you maybe play those more than others. And that's the experience that I've had with Pool, although when I've been working or when I've been out for walks, I've often, taken the time to listen to the entire nearly 2-hour record, and I've always had a brilliant time. He gives you space to feel the deep grooves on some tracks, and other tracks it kind of makes you feel contemplative and thoughtful. On a track like Testo BC Mashup, he manages to do both. The breakbeats go so hard, but they never engulf that airy pad soundscape that makes it sound so revelatory. I love this record, and as fans of electronic music should not miss this. 9. Richard Dawson and Circle. Henki. Right at the tail end of the year, Richard Dawson arrives with a beguiling and human piece of work in a way that only Richard Dawson can. But it's the collaboration with Finnish rock band Circle that really makes this quite a proggy record in its execution. It's a record that can dial up the aggression in quite a big way, but at other times can just bring things down to a pastoral simmer. Ivy's chorus as Dawson croons tendrils surging up. They're matched by these achingly high strings that accompany it, and then after that we get this kind of surging psychedelic wig out. On Silene, the drums replicate that driving krautrock beat while Dawson sings from the perspective of an ancient seed. Yep. And throughout the record, it still retains that signature Dawson style, even though he's collaborating with Circle. It's something that sounds entirely out of its time, like we've just unearthed a lost masterpiece from the 70s. Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, Carnage. Name an artist with a greater late period run than Nick Cave. It's insane. Look at where he's come from in the 80s with The Birthday Party, all the incredible Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds records in the 90s and the noughties, and then ever since 2013, we've been getting records that are so brimming with emotion, something that I didn't necessarily think we'd get from Nick Cave in his later stages. I thought for a time that he may go down the Dig Lazarus Dig and kind of stompy rock route a lot more, the Grinder Man route, for example, but he really hasn't. A lot of that has been down to the death of his teen son. That started with Skeleton Tree, and we had Ghosteen after that as well. And this record, Carnage, with Warren Ellis, really feels like a continuation of that sound. The pair have once again released a record that feels kind of like a spiritual experience, prophetic and scriptural. And if you've seen Nick Cave live, it gives you the same kind of feelings that you get when you get to see him in a close-up space. The rousing open a hand of God, where the strings swoop through the mix and electronic percussion pulsates around Nick's ever-present vocal. White Elephant, where he tells us he's going to shoot us in the fucking face. And the slow moments feel more beautiful than ever. The title track Carnage, or the heartbreaking Shattered Ground, which sounds like a sequel to Distant Sky from Skeleton Tree. It's just another classic Nick Cave record, which we're coming to expect now. 7. Really From. The band that really didn't get enough praise this year, especially considering so many rock bands were heaped with praise, bands like Squid and Black Country New Road and Black Midi, Shame, Idols to an extent. I'll repeat myself from earlier in the year, but this record is like listening to American football if they leaned into their jazzy instrumentation even more and they were even braver, perhaps, than they ever tried to be. It's a record that's aged like a fine wine for me throughout the year. It kind of has those cathartic, mathy, emo kind of vibes with musicians that are playing that have an obvious infatuation for the way jazz instrumentation works. And on paper, that doesn't really sound like a particularly exciting prospect, but it really does work. The opening track, Apartment Song, sets their mission statement up from the off. It builds to this brilliant finale with intense horns. It's kind of exquisite. I just love that opening, and it completely sold me on the record. And the horns, trombone, flugelhorn, trumpet, they really do elevate this record and make it stand out from the rest of the kind of mathy, third wave, emo revival, blah blah crowd. It's such an interesting band. Armand Hammer and the Alchemist, Haram. My favourite hip-hop record of 2021, and yes, I've censored the album art because not everyone wants to look at severed pigs' heads. Elucid and Billy Woods make up the duo Armand Hammer, and teaming up with producer Alchemist, they've crafted a thoughtful, alternative hip-hop record that will have you running to genius to get every last morsel of detail from their knotty and dexterous bars. The production is top-notch. On the track Roaches Don't Fly, they accentuate with a really tasty guitar solo. On Black Sunlight, the flutes and horns have a real 70s West Coast warmth to them. Meanwhile, on Pepper Tree, it's all about reverse samples that dizzy the listener, and the only thing you've actually got to hold on to is Billy Wood's vocal delivery, and it's such a great moment that just lands so well on this record. It's got lyrical prowess, stellar production, everything you could possibly want. 5. Rival Consoles, Pulses of Information. A reminder that you should really wait as late as possible to do these Album of the Year lists. Rival Consoles followed up Persona, one of my favourite electronic records of last decade, with a searing statement of intent. Ryan Lee West proved how adept he was at crafting atmosphere on the previous record, and to his immense credit decided to embark on an entirely different journey for Pulses of Information. It's a record that's at times challenging, uncomfortable even. Monster opens the record and you're immediately greeted with this beating, low synth, and West adds other jagged elements that flick through this soundscape. It's kind of dizzying in a way that you don't really know where he's going with things, especially on a first listen. You feel kind of blinded to where he's going to take you. Even the moments that hark back to something a little bit prettier, like on Persona, feel like they're teetering on the precipice of being a bit sinister. Hands, for example, or Tension in the Clouds. This is an incredible journey of a record that cements Rival Consoles as one of the most important electronic artists working today, and I don't say that lightly. Him and Hannah Peel, I mean, wow, what incredible records that you really do need to experience for yourself. 4. Black Midi, Cavalcade. It's our 2021 prog record, a sophomore slice of genius from Black Midi that reminds me of bands like King Crimson and Cardiacs in that this is 100% their vision and you're either along for the ride or you're not. I personally am. Clearly, it's number 4 on my list. A quite different record to Schlagenheim, Greep and the gang move even further away from conventional rock sounds, although calling Schlagenheim a conventional rock record is stretching things a little bit anyway. Their arrangements on this record can make you feel lightheaded as you hang on for dear life. That opening track, John L, descends into nightmarish territory right at the end of the track. It kind of collapses into itself with syncopated, dissonant stabs. Oh, it is a real kind of intense way to begin a record. Or the incredible second half of Slow. But you also have a track like Marlene Dietrich, which shows that the band knows when to dial back on a song. It's not all about being aggressive. The pastoral finale of Ascending Forth is an undeniable highlight and the thing that made me most excited about this record, and it's something I hope to see more from this incredibly talented band moving forward. 3. Pupil Slicer, Mirrors. I've been on a real heavy kick on the last year really, listening to bands like Succumb, fantastic new record, Obsolete, Humanity's Last Breath, but by far the most irascible, threatening of the lot has to be this future classic from mathcore, deathcore, power violence London trio, Pupil Slicer. A name that makes my girlfriend wince every time I mention it. It actually perfectly sums up what it feels like to listen to Mirrors. It's the righteous fury and combative nature. If I listen to this record too much, I'm going to end up with an acute neck injury. Think of the top mathcore records of the genre, Calculating Infinity, Jane Doe, We Are the Romans. This is the first record in a long time that reminds me of those classics and makes me think this is somewhere up there. And that's even more impressive considering this is a debut record. Vocalist and guitarist Katie Davies is a formidable band leader, and she somehow manages to bring some of what Ben Wyman brought in Dillinger with his guitar and what Greg Puciato brought to Dillinger with his vocals, but she's doing both at the same time. That's bloody impressive. And not only that, but she's talked about the fact that Dillinger is a big influence, and that's fine, and you can hear that on this record, but it never sounds like a Dillinger covers record. This is still the band's own sound. The blast beats of Vilified, the breakneck speed of Stabbing Spiders, which is so intense despite being only 47 seconds long, even that atmospheric finale, Collective Unconscious. If you have a taste for the brutal, you need this in your life. Number 2. Self-Esteem, Prioritise Pleasure. Every couple of years a record comes along that feels so perfect you feel like you need to tell every single person you come across about it, even those people whose world doesn't revolve entirely around music and they're not obsessive weirdos like me. And Self-Esteem's Prioritise Pleasure is that record for me in 2021. Not only because what she writes about is funny, frank and intimate, but it's pop that's stirring and dramatic and at times heartbreaking. It's kind of music that should make Rebecca Lucy Taylor a star as big as Beyonce. I am deadly fucking serious when I say that. I've been talking about her pretty much non-stop since her debut record, Compliments Please, and this follow-up absolutely cements her talent as a musician. She's broken into the mainstream this year with heaps of praise for this record, but it all started with the first single, I Do This All the Time. Not only probably the best song released in 2021, but something that has transcended the music head circles and received plays in places like Radio 1. It's an anthem of the disillusioned, messy lives we all lead today, and it's an impassioned reflection on the expectations of women in a society that thinks it is more progressive than it actually is. I saw her perform this record with a friend earlier last month, and a shiver went down my spine when the sold-out crowd screamed in unison, "It was really rather miserable trying to love you." We both felt like we were witnessing one of those cultural moments, an artist that truly matters and should matter to everybody. Still Raining is a highlight on a record of highlights as the chorus kind of soars and Rebecca sings, "The love you need is gentle, the love you need is kind," the kind of yearning that every single one of us feels. Number 1, For Those I Love, For Those I Love. And here we are with the best deep cuts record of 2021. David Balfe's heartbreaking and life-affirming ode to the depth of a friendship lost and confined to memory, but preserved as if in amber by this incredible album. David's focus never leaves his friend Paul Curran for the entirety of the record. Paul killed himself, and David has written a record teeming with intimate moments of their childhood, adolescence and early adulthood that keeps his memory alive, in a way no other statement of artistic intent could. He has one of the most unique vocal deliveries you're likely to hear this year. I remember the first time I listened to this record, I thought of Mike Skinner, and actually Mike Skinner is someone that David alludes to a couple of different times in the lyricism on this record, clearly an influence. His thick Irish accent jumps from lilting to aggressive, and I love it when someone sings in their native accent in this way and brings that personality, doesn't try to hold it back at all, just really goes for it and lets it be part of this record. The subject matter might sound heavy, but it's never a slog to get through. The record never collapses under the weight of that intensity. Part of that is the way David cleverly uses the euphoria of dance music and electronic music to evoke the nostalgia you feel when you're with your mates on a night out, or seeing the profound in the small things. The moment where he sings, "As we laid that couch down in the backfields and then made ourselves away, fire walk with me, I hear you say." Before a halftime beat jumps in and these icy synths ping out into the ether. It is such a moment, and one that gives me shivers down my back every single time I listen to it. And I have heard this record a lot this year. The reprisal of the opening lyrical motif, "I have a love and it never fades," is what makes up the final track on the record. And it's a phrase that tethers itself to every single part of this record, every aspect of the production, every single word David utters. What a privilege it is for us to be able to experience this kind of touching tribute, to be able to hear something so intimate committed to tape like this. I mean, I love it clearly. Deep Cuts 2021. Record of the year. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you have a good Christmas and New Year, and you know, COVID doesn't ruin it too much for everybody. I'll be back in the new year with some more content. I've got a couple of videos basically written. I just need the time to sit down and film them. So thank you as always for supporting Deep Cuts as a channel. I'll be back with a little bit more next year. Stay safe. See you soon.